Hello there, Commonwealth from him. The Nintendo Switch 2 has had a solid Zelda start. Still, the big release is Age of Imprisonment, Hyrule Warriors, concluding 2025. But beyond that, we're entering 2026, the 40th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda. So be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell. The 40th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda. It has to be momentous, it has to have a game of some sort. And if we look at the history of anniversaries, you will find a remaster or remake or even brand new games in this year. Of course, we can't expect a brand new Zelda game because it's too soon. What we can expect though is the return of a Zelda game that we haven't seen in at least 10 years. We could see a top-down remake, but since Gerudo is probably busy developing brand new top-down game, in truth there are two ways to celebrate it. Because after Hyrule Warriors in 2021, for the 35th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda, we got Skyward Sword HD. Twilight Princess HD is not playable on the Nintendo Switch 2, being the only 3D Zelda that you can't play on this system. And bringing Twilight Princess in 4K for the 20th anniversary no less of that game and the 40th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda in general would make a lot of sense. But why have only one big punchline when you can start the cycle all over again? Yes, I'm talking about Ocarina of Time. This game could be saved for later. But if you're gonna do this properly again with the 3D remakes and remasters, why not start with the first 3D Zelda game, just like you did in 2011, and then had a decade of full-on remasters and remakes, all physical. The 4K era requires something new, something bold. Ocarina of Time in 4K, developed as Nashweedle has been teasing by Nintendo in-house, being the first remake / remaster in 3D done by Nintendo since the Wind Waker HD. It would be a goldmine for Nintendo. What do you have next? Not Wind Waker HD. Or it could be Wind Waker in 4K, but you already have Wind Waker in Switch Online. You continue the journey of the Hero of Time with Majora's Mask 4K. And first after that, you go into Wind Waker 4K, Twilight Princess 4K, and ultimately Skyward Sword 4K. Also that all 3D Zelda games are in 4K, entering somewhat into the 50s. But then again, the cycle from Ocarina of Time 3D to Skyward Sword HD was exactly 10 years. The 40th anniversary in 2026 could also bring the reveal of the next open-air Zelda game. We know we have Hyrule Warriors, Age of Imprisonment, and in 2026 it's likely we're gonna get some DLC for that game. It's a way to use that year to conclude it and then reveal the next generation art style, link, and setting for The Legend of Zelda. And some will say it was too soon. No, it isn't. It took 2 years from Breath of the Wild to the reveal of Tears of the Kingdom. And it was less than 3 years also from the launch of Skyward Sword to the reveal of what became Breath of the Wild. 3D open-air Zelda games get revealed years in advance. And come June 2026, we have gone 3 years from The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. In other words, further than in the last 2 cases. Yes, of course, it's likely that Ocarina of Time would be revealed, say in a February Direct, celebrating the 40th anniversary, and then in a Summer Direct, you reveal the next Legend of Zelda game, which is pretty much the strategy we had in 2019, where Link's Awakening was revealed in February, followed by the next Zelda game in June 2019. But enough about the 40th anniversary, which probably will contain some other things to celebrate The Legend of Zelda. Let's move over to 2027, a year that could have a remake of a top-down Zelda game. The hottest candidate has of course been for a while now, the Oracle games. Though that is quite the ambitious challenge to pull off, and what would be a simpler task is the Minish Cap. On the other side, it could also be a year where we get a new top-down Legend of Zelda game. It all depends on what happens in 2028. Is that a year for another 3D remake, or is it a year where we get the next brand new open-air Zelda game? Remember, it'll be 5 years since The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, a game that had no paid expansions and has allowed the Zelda team to move on to the next project. The launch timing, or at least the planned launch timing, of the next open-air Zelda game will decide a lot when it comes to 2027 and 2029. There is space for more remakes and remasters, but having them 2 years in a row, so 2026 and 2027, might be overkill. So I know it might be a little bit ambitious, but I know Gerudo is hungry for more. And we know they're capable of pulling off projects relatively quickly, especially when it comes to the top-down style. I wouldn't be surprised if a new top-down Zelda game is ready in 2027. After all, it will be 3 full years since we had a brand new Zelda game at that point. And I feel like Nintendo wants to not wait much longer than 2 years into the system before they have a The Legend of Zelda game that isn't a remake or remaster or re-release, edition-wise. And also by launching Rezo's next game in 2027, you give a little bit more breathing room. You allow the next open-air Zelda game to actually come out in 2029, and then can fill 2028 with another remake/remaster in 4K. 2028 is the 30th anniversary of Ocarina of Time. So say 2026, you have a 4K version of Twilight Princess, and then in 2028 you have a 4K version of Ocarina of Time. So 2028 is a tricky one. It really depends on what happens in 2027. And then sometime in the first half of 2029, much like in the case of Tears of the Kingdom, have the next brand new Zelda open-air game. It would be acceptable because it would still be within the 4-year range from the launch of Nintendo Switch 2, and seeing that these open-air Zelda games take longer and longer to develop, I think we should be aware that yes, they might be targeting 2028, but it could very easily end up being 2029, because 3D Zelda games get delayed a lot. 2030, no anniversary, but the 5th year could be another remake, remaster, or a new Hyrule Warriors tied to that next open-air Zelda game. And we know that Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment was originally developed for the Nintendo Switch. But yeah, the next Hyrule Warriors, 5 years after the previous one, just like Age of Imprisonment, 5 years after Age of Calamity, which again was 6 years after the original Hyrule Warriors, it makes sort of sense. And then in 2031, for the 45th anniversary, well, you can have another remake or remaster, whether it's top-down or 3D. If you have restarted the cycle, well, then most likely you would have Wind Waker 4K here, which sort of makes sense when you think about it, because well, we have gone 6 years since we got Wind Waker on GameCube Switch 2 online, so the appeal of that one is gone. I think people will want to play Wind Waker in 4K with all the enhancements that the HD version provided nearly 20 years prior. But at the same time, if we have a new top-down Zelda game in 2027, 2031 could also be the year when we have the next one. It would be 2 years away, at least, from the next open-air Zelda game. And as a result, you would have a game that would be able to fill out the gap pretty well. The Nintendo Switch 2 will probably last until, if it's as successful as the Nintendo Switch and continues to be so, until 2033, so 8 years. I don't think Nintendo will go beyond that, and then introducing a new generation at that point. At some point, we will need a remake of the NES, the very first Zelda, because we have seen remakes, or at least reimaginations or sequels to SNES Zelda, the remakes of the N64 Zeldas, GameCube, Wii, Nintendo Switch. I have a feeling that it's going to happen at least by the end of the 50th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda. But yes, that is pretty much how I see the 40s. It's a blend of new games, remakes, remasters, restarting 3D cycles, continuing the return of new top-down Zelda games developed by Zreo, and of course brand new open-air The Legend of Zelda games. Yes, the next open-air Zelda game could thus be, after the one that we're going to get on the Nintendo Switch 2, will likely be on, well, the successor of the system that we just started with. And that one will probably be launched before the 50th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda, but not by much. It's gonna be probably 2 or 3 years before that, probably in the range of 2033. We could be looking actually at dual launch between the Nintendo Switch 2 and its successor, just like we saw in the case of Breath of the Wild between the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch. But of course it depends on when we get the next open-air Zelda game, because if it's gonna take as long as, well, the development was for Tears of the Kingdom and forbid 6 years again to the next open-air Zelda game, then we're looking at an exclusive on the next Nintendo system after the Nintendo Switch 2. And that way we have filled out the next 10 years of The Legend of Zelda. Probably having another Hyrule Warriors in 2035 then, and in 2036 that remake that we talked about. But what are your thoughts about the next 10 years of The Legend of Zelda? Or actually 11, since we're going to the 50th anniversary. Do you think the strategy that we have outlined is a realistic one, and one that will bring the most money for Nintendo, since that's what really matters at the end of the day? Or do you think that they will go for a different strategy? Sound off in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell to not miss any upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 and Zelda videos. Last but not least, a big thanks to you for watching until the 50th anniversary Zelda end, and to all our patreon.com/CommonRealm patrons. Special shoutouts go to Raw Producer, JC Funk, and Heroes, Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holly Wolf, and Kintaro. You all rock, and please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.